I've been thinking a lot lately about what are we actually doing here? Because we are having a lot of growing pains and a lot of challenges right now. We're also doing a lot of really great things. The reality is we could probably just fine-tune all our processes, become more efficient, stay the size we are, and get to the point where we're all making plenty of money to be happy. And, what is the purpose of what we're even doing? Like, I know that at least in some meetings or when we're just joking around, I don't know if everybody's heard this, but I know that we've talked about, how we're making history or we're changing the world and people are noticing who we are, and even Daikin overseas knows who we are. And we can talk like, oh, we're making a difference or we're changing the world, and that's like super cute to say and all, but how is a heating company actually going to make a big impact? Because we could mean it as, we're changing our world or one person at a time. And not that that's not good, but that's not what I'm talking about, and that's not what gets me excited. There's just so much more that we could do. So I think that it's a vision that we need to actually talk about. 10 years from now, I promise you, whether you are still here or you've moved on, you will remember this. About 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, I read a book called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. And at the time, I didn't really know who he was. And looking back, everything that he said was going to happen was 100% true. The guy's a wicked genius when it comes to business. Looking back, I didn't understand it at all at the time, but it was inspiring. And a few years later, I bumped into a piece of his content, one of his videos on Facebook. I was like, oh, that guy seems super familiar. So I started scrolling through his stuff, and I was like, I think that's the guy whose book I read forever ago. He had just helped his dad's liquor store grow from about $3 million in revenue to about $60 million in revenue in about 8 or 9 years. Started his own marketing agency in the back room of another marketing agency. When I bumped into him again, he had a couple hundred employees, a major office in New York, and was doing, I think he was going to do like $100 million that year in business, and was one of the fastest growing agencies of all time. Fast forward 5 years later to today, he's going to do over $1 billion in business. He has 1,500 employees. He's in 7 countries. A lot of his message in the beginning was like the overall macro premise of here's how you market and brand using these strategies. As he got more notoriety, he started leaning into the soft skills. Like, what am I really doing? So he points to love, kindness, empathy, honesty, integrity. He calls it his honey empire. And the whole thing is, it not only feels 10 times better, but it's significantly more practical to treat people that way and to build a company that way. And he's proving it by being the fastest growing agency of all time. Now, a few years ago, I went to my dad. I said, hey, I think we could do some things differently. We need to show the internal culture on the outside. Our brand needs to mean something. We need to lean more heavily into the soft skills, love, empathy, kindness. It didn't go anywhere. I kept talking to him. A few weeks later, I finally started showing him videos of Gary Vee. And he suddenly got it, and we went to work. We've had people literally say, coming here changed my life. So on a smaller scale, we're starting to have that same impact because some guy decided to build a massive company and then point to love, kindness, empathy, honesty, and integrity, honey empire, treat people the right way. It opens up creativity. It makes people feel safe. Like even to the point of when people want to start a competing agency, he helps them get started. Now we're getting an insane amount of notoriety all of a sudden for going from $4 million to $12 million in a few years. We're about to go from $12 million to $20 million in 12 months. How many heads are going to look? We talk about the impact that we've had on the city. It's awesome. I love what we're doing with the water in Kenya. I love how many people we get to participate in the clothing drive and the food drive. That is fantastic. It's not scale. We can have such a big impact. And the reason why is because when we grow to 100 million, to 200 million, to whatever the number is, the number is not important. Like I said, the number is just a metric to show how the machine's working. And when we can show we have a machine that works better than anyone else's machine, and they say, why, how, what can we do? Honesty, integrity, love, empathy, soft skills, honey empire. Pretty soon you have every contractor in the world looking at Advantage Heating going, what are they doing? Because it's already happening now. All across the country, people know what we're doing. When we go to these places, Daikin events, thermal events in Hawaii and all these places, they all want to talk to us and find out what we're doing. When we're at the sales trainings, and we're the #2 fit sales in the country in a climate where you don't need a lot of AC and in a tiny little market, everyone wants to know what we're doing. So what happens when the exposure balloons out? What happens when that's Forbes magazine? What happens when that's Bloomberg? What happens when that's people who have a real stage and a real platform? Pretty soon, however many other contractors looking at Advantage Heating go, wait, that actually works? We can actually operate like that and live like that? Then how many of their employees are affected? Then how many of their families and extended family are affected? Then how many of their customers are affected from there? And when they do significantly well, what happens from there? And how far does the ripple effect and the butterfly effect go? The more companies that operate this way, the more the world is impacted. And we're not just going to do it on a small local level. We're going to do it on the world stage. We've been talking about Imagine lately, and people have had fantastic imaginations. I do not say this tongue-in-cheek or lightly, because as cheesy as it sounds, every time we change a furnace, that's one step closer to changing the world. And that's how a small heating company in Salem, Oregon impacts the global scale.